Hello friends. In this video, I will tell you about the serial maniac Albert Fish. Enjoy watching. Maniac Albert Fish is considered one of the first officially recognized maniacs in America. This old man kidnapped, raped, killed, and ate children at the beginning of the 20th century. The exact number of his victims has not been established to this day. I always wanted to hurt others and make others hurt me. Albert Fish. The future maniac and cannibal Fish was born in Washington in 1870. His father, Randall Fish, a fertilizer dealer, turned 75 that year. He was 43 years older than Albert's mother. The maniac had two brothers and a sister, but he was the youngest. Much later, psychiatrists and researchers would claim that all members of the Fish family suffered from various mental disorders. Most likely, by making absentee diagnoses, scientists were trying to find the most realistic explanation, from their point of view, of what turns an ordinary person into a bloody monster. In any case, no reliable evidence of Fish's mental deviations was ever presented. At birth, the future maniac was given the name Hamilton. Then he was 5 years old. His father, Randall Fish, died right on the street from a heart attack. The Fishes did not have any special savings, and Hamilton's mother was forced to give him to an orphanage. There he received a nickname that sounded like his name. He could not get rid of it for a very long time, which is why he did not like the name given to him at birth. And while still in the orphanage, Fish realized that he enjoyed pain. At that time, many American orphanages practiced physical punishment in the form of flogging. During the punishments and then the assault, little Fish would get an erection. For an 8-year-old boy, this was unusual and served as an additional incentive to bully Fish. For years later, in 1879, Albert's mother was able to get a job in the civil service and take her son, but the experience she had in the orphanage changed the future monster forever. He was only 12 when he entered into a same-sex relationship with a boy mailman who delivered telegrams. Around the same time, Fish began to visit public baths, where he could freely look at men without clothes. He was especially attracted to boys aged 7 to 12. In 1890, Fish moved to New York. Immediately after the move, he changed his hated name Hamilton to Albert. Later, he said that he moved to take up prostitution. It is unknown whether he carried out his plans. But it was possible to establish that after moving, he began to regularly force small boys. The maniac chose his victims among the street children, of whom there were many on the streets of New York at that time. They did not want to report to the police, and therefore the police did not know about Fish's antics. However, Albert's mother suspected something and decided to urgently marry her son. In 1898, Albert married a 19-year-old girl who was picked out by his mother. From this marriage, Fisher had 6 children, 4 sons and 2 daughters, but he continued to hunt for children. In 1903, the maniac was caught stealing from a warehouse, where he worked either as a loader or a stockbroker. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison and sent to the famous Sing Sing prison. Albert was quite popular in prison. In those days, men with unconventional views still tried not to advertise their preferences and therefore hardened. Prisoners who had not seen women for decades had to use weaker cellmates. And here there was no need to force. Albert was always for it. After leaving prison in 1905, Fish went quiet for a while, or maybe he didn't. In those days, there was no global information, and therefore no one ever found out about some of his crimes. Your first deprivation of life, which Fish is accused of, he committed in 1910. The victim was Thomas Badin from Delaware, who was 10. The next massacre took place 9 years later. Only according to the police, he took the life of a mentally retarded boy in Virginia with a knife. The monster committed a new crime 5 years later. On July 14, 1924, 8-year-old Francis McDonald disappeared. The boy's friend said that he left with an elderly, thin man with a gray mustache. The police began searching for the gray man, one of Fish's nicknames, given to him by the police for the color of his coat. But at that time, the police had no experience in investigating such unmotivated crimes, and the investigation led to nothing. On February 11, 1927, 4-year-old Billy Gaffney disappeared. A witness to the abduction was Gaffney's 3-year-old friend. Also Billy, he said that a strange man approached them while they were playing near the house. Why strange? He was so fabulous. Not at all scary, the boy said. And the witness also described the criminal's gray mustache, which even allowed them to touch. Undoubtedly, today's policemen would have latched on to the gray mustache and would have been able to connect these clarifications. But the experience of the policemen of that time made a difference. The Maniac committed his most famous kidnapping and murder in June 1928. 18-year-old Edward, but placed an ad in the newspaper looking for work in a rural area and indicated his address. That's where 58-year-old Fish came. Quit, he possibly wanted to kidnap the young man. However, when he arrived, he saw Edward's 10-year-old sister, Grace, and his plans changed. He spent a few hours with the Buds, promised to hire Edward, and left. He returned as promised. A couple of days later, told Edward to pack his things, and he would come for him later. And while Edward was packing Fish, he introduced himself as Farmer Frank Howard and convinced Grace's parents to let her go with him to the party, saying that his niece, who lived not very far away, was having a birthday. The gullible Buds let the girl go and never saw her again. By the way, 2 years after Grace's disappearance, the police arrested a certain Charles Edward Pope. His wife reported to the police that it was he who kidnapped the girl. Pope was put behind bars for 4 months, but his guilt could not be proven at the trial. But it turned out that Pope was going to divorce his wife and even moved out of their shared apartment, a woman's revenge. And 6.5 years after Grace's disappearance, in November of 1934, her mother, Delia, received an anonymous letter. This letter, sent by a maniac, became the most famous of all the messages from criminals. The executioner set out 2 shocking details in his message. Here is what was written in the letter. My dear Mrs. Bath, in 1894, my friend sailed as a sailor on a steamship under the command of Captain John Davis from San Francisco. They sailed to Hong Kong, China. On arrival, my friend and 2 other sailors went ashore and got drunk. When they returned, the ship had already left. There was a famine in China at the time. Meat of any kind was from $1 to $3 a pound. And as the poor suffered most, all children under 12 were sold for food to save the older ones from starvation. A boy or girl under 14 was not safe in the streets. You could go into any store and ask for a steak, and they would cook you meat. You would be given pieces of the boy's or girl's body if you only wanted a cut of such meat. The boy's or girl's behind is the most delicious part of the body, and it was sold for the highest price. The friend who lingered there acquired a taste for human flesh. On his return to New York, he captured boys there, aged 7 and 11. Hiding them in his out-of-the-way house, he kept them tied up in a closet. Several times a day, he spanked them to make the meat more palatable. The first boy he killed was an 11-year-old boy because he was fatter and had more flesh. The younger boy followed suit. I was then living at 409 East Street. A friend had so often told me of the taste of human flesh that I determined to try it to form my own opinion. On Sunday, the 3rd of June, 28, I called on you at 406 West Street. I brought you a basket of strawberries. We had breakfast. Grace sat on my lap and kissed me. I decided to eat her. I offered to take her to a party. You said yes, she could go. I took her to an empty house in Worcester, which I had previously selected. When we got there, I told her to stay outside. She was picking wild flowers. I went upstairs and took off all my clothes. I knew that if I started doing what I intended, I would stain her with blood. When everything was ready, I went to the window and called her. Then I hid in the closet until she came into the room. When she saw me without clothes, she screamed and tried to run away to the stairs. I grabbed her, and she told me that she would tell her mother everything. First, I took off all her clothes, how she kicked, bit, and tore. I strangled her. It took me 9 days to completely eat her flesh. I did not use her for sexual purposes, although I could if I wanted, Fish wrote in the letter. The maniac later told his lawyer that he had taken advantage of Grace, but the police did not confirm this statement. In general, as psychiatrists noted, Fish was simply a pathological liar. Grizz's parents did not believe that what the maniac described was real. They thought that someone had played a stupid and terrible joke on them. But the letter was still delivered to the police and fell into the hands of the chief investigator, William King. And the policeman did not think that it was a prank. And he also immediately drew attention to the fact that the letter was sealed in a branded envelope. The hexagonal emblem of the New York Private Benevolent Association of Drivers was clearly recognizable on the envelope. Such envelopes were not issued in millions, but in small batches. King ordered a thorough questioning of all employees of the organizations regarding the misuse of the envelopes. The doorman admitted that he took several envelopes for his own needs. However, he did not have time to use them all. He forgot several in the room from which he had recently moved out. The landlady of the room said that after this doorman, the room was rented by an elderly thin man with a gray mustache. She also said that the lodger receives money from his son. Having moved out a few days ago, he did not receive the last transfer and had to come for it. King decided to meet the suspicious grandfather himself. In those days, there would not have been special forces and to arrest criminals. The police sometimes went alone, as did King. Albert Fish, as soon as the investigator introduced himself and offered to go with him, attacked King with two dangerous razors in his hands. But the policeman overpowered the maniac and took him to headquarters. There, the monster immediately confessed to taking Grace's life, and the girl's mother and brother identified him. But the police decided to check Fish for other disappearances as well. His photo was published in the newspaper, and soon a trolleybus controller contacted the police, who identified Fish as a man. A boy who rode in transport on February 11th, 1927, with a little boy. A witness said that he remembered the strange couple because the boy was without a jacket, cried, and constantly called for his mother. It was the day of the disappearance. Bill Gaffney, whose body was never found, the boy's mother, turned directly to the maniac and asked him to tell about his son, and Fish told everything as it was. Told how he mocked him and how he ate him for 4 days. After the letter from Grace's mother, most psychiatrists began to declare that Albert Fish was insane and could not be tried. Apparently, this was the verdict that the maniac was seeking, who described his exploits. The criminal also claimed that he deeply believed in God, and even when he ate his victims and drank their blood, he was simply performing a ritual. But although psychiatrists were inclined to think that he was insane, Fish was nevertheless brought before a jury. It was quite possible that this was a political decision, one way or another, but on March 11th, 1935, the trial began, which recognized Fish's involvement in 3 lives. The police accused him of 15, and the criminal himself confessed to 498. The trial ended 10 days later with a death sentence. After listening to it, the maniac exclaimed, "What a delight to die in an electric chair. It would be the highest pleasure, the only one I have never experienced." He really was a masochist and did not exaggerate at all that he enjoyed pain. When Alberto Fish was chained to the electric chair in the already familiar Sing Sing prison on January 16, 1936, they could not immediately pass the current through his body. The switch had to be turned on twice before the doctor. Fish pronounced him dead. The cause was revealed during the autopsy. It turned out that Fish had driven several dozen needles into his own body. 27 of them were found in the groin area alone. This metal prevented the normal flow of electric current, but this same metal brought unbearable suffering to Fish. It seems that the maniac got plenty of pleasure from the double execution.